Hey everybody, welcome back. I have to tell you, I apologize for the casualness of this video, but I had not intended on doing another video so soon, but a couple of things have occurred in archaeology, and especially my area of biblical archaeology, that I just was so excited to share with you all. But first, I have two, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit. This won't be as polished, but I have two kind of announcements. First of all, a book that I have been going through two book announcements that I really want to share. So let me get everything together. But the first book announcement is about the Harvest Handbook of the Bible Lands. It's by Dr. Steve Collins and Joseph Holden. And it is a great book if you want to know about biblical archaeology and the biblical lands and what was happening historically at that time. And so here's the front cover of the book. Please, you can get it on Amazon. It's a wonderful guidebook to have for biblical archaeology. The other one is from a friend of a colleague of mine, Eric Klein. I've seen several of his lectures through ASOR and things, and he is a great guy. He just released it's a second edition. It's called 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed. It's turning points in ancient history. And so I'm going to turn my iPad around to show it to you. It's a wonderful option, a wonderful book, kind of tells you a little bit about what was going on in the ancient world. Phenomenal. So I wanted to give those two plugs real quick because I think that's just really important. So the other thing, so here's my two huge things. So as you guys get to know me, my other obsession, it's really like a passion, is fashion. I am a fashionista. I love fashion. I love clothes. I have a few too many. So anytime there's an archaeological discovery that has something to do with clothing, I get very excited. Let me apologize up front. I'm going to be looking down, reading my notes a lot because there was just so much information and I was so excited. So announced just yesterday was the discovery of royal purple fabric from the ancient world. So, this fabric, the fabric dyed is the famous purple fabric from Phoenicia, and it's known as Tyrian purple. It was considered more valuable than gold, and it was associated with wealth and royalty in ancient times. It was stunningly beautiful. It was extremely valuable. The cloth itself, let me see if I've got a picture because I wanted to give you one of the pictures just so that you could see it. It's been in the news quite a bit. This is some of the purple fibers that you can see. And then the other piece of cloth. It is so rare. So I work on an excavation in the Middle East, the Tal El Hammam excavation project. If you've ever wanted to go on an excavation, this is the one to check out. But anyway, so I've worked on excavations. It's so rare to find actual cloth fibers. This is exciting. It's huge. And especially with the color retained. So this is the picture of the actual cloth that they found. And so you've got fibers, you've got cloth. And so here's what's great about it. So, it was radiocarbon dated or carbon dated to approximately 1000 BCE, which is before the Common Era. It used to be known as BC. The dating at the 1000 BCE point puts it during the time period of King David and King Solomon's reigns. So that's huge as well. It's tying into it, and we even have biblical text that talks about Solomon and the purple coloring of the cloth. So it's wonderful, just affirmation. The fabric and the thread itself was found in the Timna Valley, which is the site of an ancient copper production area, obviously in the Levant in Israel. Such a great find. So just a little bit about radiocarbon dating. We use radiocarbon dating in archaeology to help determine the age of an object. And we use it by the interaction between the organic material and the carbon isotope, the radiocarbon isotope. So it gives us a date for things. let's see, this dye and this fabric is actually not only mentioned in biblical texts, but other contexts throughout the ancient world. The dye, and it's really interesting because the dye itself, again, it's from the Phoenician culture. It was produced by sea snails or mollusks that are specific to the Mediterranean. And so it's just an amazing find. I encourage you to go out, check it out. It's just, and especially if you like fashion, they had it going on back then with that beautiful color purple. Okay, so the second big interesting breaking news is about the remains of two of the apostles. And so this is really particular to biblical archaeology, and there's a lot of information here, so I may have to read some of it. But it basically breaks down to the fact that for more than 1,500 years, there's a church in Rome called Santi Apostoli, and it's been the home of the remains of what was believed to be Philip and James the Younger, or James the Lesser, two of Jesus's apostles. They had artifacts, which included a foot, a femur, and a tibia from the actual apostles. So how did this happen? First of all, how do body parts end up in churches? I get that a lot. It's called a translation. So shortly after the Emperor Constantine declared Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire, the building of churches at a really fast pace began to occur. And translations were like literally the remains of worshipped apostles and really high-ranking early Christians throughout the Roman Empire. You would exhume their bodies from graves and take portions as relics to these churches that were being built across the Roman Empire. Like I said, they're called translations. So this occurred for quite a bit of time after Constantine announces Christianity as the state religion. So the remains of Philip and James have actually been in the church since the 6th century. But the researchers are kind of unsure of how they got there. So the remains of Philip, so here's the archaeological analysis part. The remains of Philip were too contaminated to examine, but they were able to analyze the femur from James. I'm sorry, did I say that right? The remains of Philip were too contaminated to examine. But the femur from James we were able to actually analyze. They were actually able to analyze it. And the femur was and granted, these have been worshipped in this church, have been venerated in this church since the 6th century. The femur was actually radiocarbon dated to between 214 to 340 AD. Let me say that again. The dates of the femur were 214 to 340 AD. We got it wrong. So it means that the relic does not belong to James. It's not a part of his body. It's about 150 years off. But it also brings into question whether Philip's remains are actually Philip. So this just brings me back to a great part about this particular channel. And because I'm an archaeologist, I like to focus a little bit about the archaeology on things. And an essential part of archaeology is about asking the right types of questions. So the first question I have is, okay, we have some bones. Whose bones are they? And they were prominent enough to be buried and exhumed. They had been worshipped and venerated wherever the graves had been. So I do have to ask the question, who the heck do they belong to? But the more important question is, if all these, hundreds and thousands of years, you've thought it was James and Philip, where are James and Philip? Where are their bodies? So the other question is, of course, some of you may be asking, like, who the heck are these characters? So let me just give you a little bit of background. So Philip was one of the 12 original, well, actually, Philip and James, the younger, were two of Jesus's apostles. So Philip, as an apostle, did a lot of his preaching in Greece, Syria, and a part of modern-day Turkey called, and I butcher this every time, even though I'm an archaeologist and I should know better, I still butcher it, but it's Phrygia, and it's modern day Turkey. Philip came from Bethsaida near the Sea of Galilee. Let's see. And here's what's interesting about Philip. A lot of times when we're doing biblical archaeology, the Bible is something like we want to look outside the Bible to see if we can find any evidence that isn't biblical related or Bible specific. Let me say it that way. And what's great is that Philip's life is documented outside the Bible. It's just important that we can demonstrate the presence and the lives of some of these people outside of the biblical narrative. I also want to throw out a caution here. Do not confuse Philip with Philip the evangelist. That's a different person. So we just want to keep them separated. Philip dies in approximately 80 AD as a martyr. And one of the extra biblical writings is Polycrates of Ephesus sent a letter to Pope Victor saying that talking about Philip being buried at Hierapolis. Now here's the thing. If the bones in the church aren't Philip's and aren't James, we need to know where they were buried and be able to trace their path. That's what good archaeologists do. So apparently there's this letter that talks about it at Hierapolis, Here's what's interesting. In 2011, Italian archaeologist, and I don't want to butcher his name, Francesco D'Andrea, claimed to have discovered his sarcophagus in the tomb during excavations there. I'll continue with that in just a minute. So let me move on to, I know I'm talking fast, it's because I'm so excited. I love discoveries like this. James the Younger, separated from James, who is the brother of Jesus. That's James the Elder, so they're two different James. He was a later disciple. He was born in the 1st century. He died in 62 AD. James the Younger is known because, well, he preached across Palestine and Egypt, and eventually was placed in charge of the church in Jerusalem. What's really interesting is a lot of people know him because of how he was died. He was actually thrown from his death from the roof of the temple. And then when that didn't kill him, he was beaten and stoned to death. So he is one of the early church martyrs. And tradition has him as being buried in the Mount of Olives. Now, so both of these, so the suspicion is, okay, these guys, along with other apostles, kind of ended up in the crypt of the 12 apostles in Rome. And that's what, if you look online, that's what a lot of people say. Well, they're in the crypt of the apostles. Okay, so the crypt of the apostles is the Santi Apostoli Church, where these bones were just shown not to be the apostles. So we have to go back to the beginning and ask ourselves, where are their bones? I mean, we've looked in some of the sarcophaguses and we've looked in other places. Now we have suspicions about where some of the other disciples are buried, but we now have 2 missing apostles, and that's quite an interesting mystery in and of itself. And then the second one is, who did the bones that they do have belong to? Now, I know somebody on one of the sites suggested DNA. I think that's where I would head. If there's enough available, I suggest DNA. I think that would be the next step in the natural process, and then to try and retrace Philip and James the Younger's steps in order to figure out where they might be, where their bones might have gone, what happened to their tombs. In some cases with the other apostles, we have knowledge of where they are. And so this is just between the cloth and James and Philip being shown not to be James and Philip, well, James not to be James. I just couldn't resist doing another video so quickly. So once again, take care. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. These are just amazing discoveries. These are out there right now. These were just released, made public. So please let me know. I do hope to be doing this again when I get these great discoveries. Take care, be safe, wear a mask if you need to, and take care.